On today's episode of the Locked On Texan podcast, the Sean Payton news drops. We also talk to Brandon K. Scott.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Thursday episode of the Locked On Texan podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. So make sure you visit prizepicks.com and use promo code Locked On. I'm John Hickman, joined by none other than Cody Davis. And some good news in the city of Houston. I think probably the best news of it all right now. If we look at off the field and things that really matter, John Mechie's recovery is going amazing right now. That was some news shared by Nick Caserio. So Cody and I will take time out on tomorrow's episode to discuss that and discuss what that could possibly mean for the future of this franchise on the offensive side of the ball. But when we look at the business side of things, the biggest story surrounding the Houston Texans firing Lovie Smith, their ex-head coach now, but even bigger, the search for a new head coach. And that head coach candidate list includes the likes of Jonathan Gannon, Ben Johnson, D'Amico Ryans is somebody that Houston Texans want to interview and has requested to talk to. But things got a little bit more interesting on Wednesday. Some gas was thrown on that fire as Sean Payton's name came up. Houston has requested to interview Sean Payton as soon as they possibly can. And, Cody, this is a team that if Sean Payton were to come to Houston on a deal, they will have to give up one of their first-round picks. Of course, it won't be the number 2 overall pick. It'll likely be the number 12 overall pick. Not likely. It'll be that pick over to the New Orleans Saints. That has happened before. When we look at the Pats with Bill Belichick, Oakland with John Gruden, Bill Parcells with the Patriots, Bill Belichick with the Jets. So these things have happened in the past before. But does it even make sense to jeopardize a first-round pick to bring in Sean Payton, send that over to New Orleans, or are there other options out there that make more sense for Houston than just bringing in a Sean Payton?
I will be all for this had the Texans lost Sunday's game, got the number 1 overall pick. That way you knew for sure that unless something changes, this team was going to draft Bryce Young. And the only reason why I'm going that route is because we all know Sean Payton history. Nobody knows it and loves it more than me. Probably my favorite coach in NFL history. Don't get me started with the NOLA, baby. But with all that, look at John's face. But with all of that being said, I think the pairing of a potential Sean Payton and Bryce Young would have been perfect. Like I mentioned, had the Houston Texans had more of a defined role, a defined path to get Bryce Young, with them dropping down to number 2, I'm starting to hear rumors that the Indianapolis Colts might trade with the Chicago Bears, and they might have an opportunity to take Bryce Young with that first overall pick. However, with all that being said, even in a situation like that, and I know I might kind of contradict myself here a little bit, I still won't feel that comfortable, only because this team has too many holes to fill. And the one thing that I want to see, whether it's Bryce Young, whether it's CJ, they need to make sure that they put their quarterback in a great position so they can go out there and succeed. We saw what Davis Mills was working with last year. And even though I do believe, let's say for the sake of this argument, they do keep this whole entire wide receiving core intact, I still believe like CJ, Bryce, I think they will be better than Davis Mills. But at the same time, they would still struggle to move the ball down the field because that wide receiving core, let's be real, is not really good outside of the potential of a Nico Collins. And as of right now, Nico Collins have not shown us that he
I
can
like
stay
Amari
healthy.
Rodgers for the future as well, by the way.
I mean, Amari Rodgers, CJ Moore, no disrespect to neither one of those guys, but in terms of putting your quarterback in a really good or a damn good situation, they have to boost their wide receiving core. And I think that's why their second first round pick, which is number 12, correct, is going to be very valuable for a team like the Houston Texans. And, we know what Sean Payton could do, especially with a smaller quarterback, i.e. Drew Brees. But I think what also helped them in New Orleans was the fact that the Saints had a lot more veterans, and it was a little bit more of a free agency destination, how the way he was able to set the foundation of that Saints franchise for what that ran for almost 20 years. They was almost together for almost 20 years. I think somewhere in the ballpark of 16, 17 years. But I just think that this team isn't in a position to give up a first round pick regardless of who that head coach is. And I hate to say it because you know how much I love Sean Payton, but I don't think it'll be a good fit.
Yeah, and I'm going to piggyback off of you, Cody, by saying, can another coach build your franchise without giving up that pick? And I think in this coaching search, in this cycle, I think that answer is yes. I think that you can find what you're looking for offensively in the Ben Johnson. I think you could find what you're looking for offensively in the Mike Kafka, and allow those guys to pick the personnel and the coaching staff that they want to bring in Houston and not meddle in that. I think you can find those things and also keep what you've worked for, right? You worked for that number 12 overall pick by trading Deshaun Watson, got him out the paint here in Houston, got that pick back from the Browns, and he was suspended. The Browns weren't very good with or without him. That led you to the number 12 overall pick. And with that pick, you're looking at a team, like you said, Cody. So I'm going to mirror a lot of what you said. If you do go quarterback, I'm saying if I think it's, a given, right?
It gotta be. It better be.
It better be, right? But crazier things have happened. But you go with quarterback number 2 overall, your first pick on the board. With number 12, it makes sense to go out there and pair that quarterback, or at least pair your franchise, rather, with an explosive and dynamic wide receiver. Hell, if one of those defensive players are available that you really like and you really have your eyes on and you scouted and believe that this guy can be somewhat of a difference maker on your defense and he's available at number 12, then you go out there and bring that guy in as well. So, again, I like Sean Payton, and I think what Sean Payton immediately brings that no other coach will bring is the excitement back to this franchise. Immediately. We have guys that we like, right? We like Ben Johnson. We like Mike Kafka. A lot of us, and I'm saying us, I mean like media guys or fans of the team, like D'Amico Ryans. I think when you look at D'Amico, you can probably compare D'Amico to the likes of Sean Payton in terms of restoring faith and excitement to this franchise, considering what he did for this franchise. Rookie of the year, one of the all-time greats for this franchise, the best linebacker in franchise history. Then you look at Sean Payton, Super Bowl winning champ, Super Bowl winning coach, got there a couple times, and what he's been able to do, what he was able to do in New Orleans for that long time. Those two guys immediately bring excitement back, but excitement, I don't think, should always come at the expense of losing out on how you're able to build brick by brick. And I think with number 2 and number 12, those are the brick by brick, options to build this franchise up. So I'm not 100% against it, but I'm not 100% for it. And I think that, again, are there any other coaches out there in this cycle that you believe and trust can do the same thing for your franchise that a Sean Payton can do? There's only one other coach that will bring that excitement and enjoyment back to their fan base, and that's D'Amico. But if we're looking at meaningful wins in the future, I don't think sacrificing that number 12 pick right now is the right move to do. I could be wrong in the next couple of months. I could change my mind depending on what happens with the coaching staff and what they're able to do in free agency. But as of right now, I'm going to go against it BetOnline is your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. Get all of the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season, basketball, and the World Cup. They've got it all over at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is always where the game starts. And I'm also really geeked out by our new partner and sponsor of today's episode, the mobile game Ultimate Football GM. If you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your own football franchise, your dream can come true, and this game is definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the season, and lead your team to glory. You're responsible for hiring the right coaches and coordinators, trading players, making draft picks, and navigating your franchise through free agency and the draft and all of the ups and downs of the season. All of this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline, so you can play on the go as you want to, when you want to. Our Locked On Texans listeners get 100% free boost to their franchise when using promo code Locked On in all caps in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps. So make sure you check it out today. And again, to download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on your app store. That's ultimate-gm.com. The Ultimate Football General Manager game is where you can start your fantasy today.
I would say this day, it's been a hard day. It's been a rough day, but I would say it's been a very thoughtful and productive day. I've had the opportunity to meet with essentially all of our coaches here in the building that are on staff for their feedback, for their perspective on where they see things. Had an opportunity to meet with the team and with the players and address them and be honest and very candid about where we are. And my message to them was about accountability and that I take responsibility where we are and that I'm committed to them and doing everything I can. This is a players' league. This is about the players. So you're only as good as the players that you have in your building, and it's a people business. You're only as good as the people that you have in your building. So our commitment is to find the best people, to utilize the resources that we have, to try to continue to move this program along in a positive direction. Say we've made some strides and some progress. We've put ourselves in a decent position. I think that's the best way to summarize it. I think it's important, and nobody wants to hear words. It's about action, and nobody's going to be happy until we have results behind that action.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen. As you guys just saw, some of you guys probably saw and heard it again. That was Nick Caserio doing his opening statement during his press conference on Monday. And I played it again because there's a guy sitting on the opposite side of the screen by the name of Brandon K. Scott from Sports Radio 610 that was at the press conference alongside of me. Brandon, welcome back to Locked On Texans.
Yeah, man. Always good to be joining you, and especially good to be joining the show around these times. I think that especially when you're covering the level of team that we've been covering over the last few years, to all of the losing and all of the lack of success and all of the drama. But in terms of like building the team and what's important about the team, the offseason is more important than the season itself for a team like this. And so this is when the work begins for us, my man.
Yeah, you ain't lying about that. Now, of course, we're in this situation because of the firing of Coach Lovie Smith that took place on Sunday, literally right when the team landed from a victory in Indianapolis. Brandon, before we start talking about Nick Caserio, I want to get your thoughts about the firing of Coach Lovie Smith.
Yeah, I think it was something that they needed to do, that they had to do, just from the standpoint of knowing that Lovie Smith was not going to be the coach and this staff was not going to be the staff that was going to lead them to where they're trying to go. I think that much was clear. I also think that they probably knew that when they hired Lovie, and that's the curious part of the last two coaching hires to begin with, is that, yeah, and this is my issue with it, Cody, is that now we have 2 years in a row. Well, now we're going to have a third year in a row where they're going to hire a new coach. But we have now 2 years in a row where they hired a coach, either in David Culley or in Lovie Smith, that they either didn't believe in or should not have believed in. And I would say whether they believed in David Culley or not, they should not have believed in him. And with Lovie Smith, you can just tell from the way that the hiring process went down last year. If you can remember, he wasn't one of the names on the interview list and the finalist list until it became clear that he was, somebody that they were going to hire. Like we didn't even know that Lovie Smith was a legitimate candidate until it looked like he was the one that they were going to actually hire.
He didn't even know.
He didn't even know.
In his introductory press conference, he said, "I don't even remember when I became a candidate."
Yeah, but he did acknowledge. It was kind of a throw-in comment, but in one of his quotes, he acknowledged there toward the end that it was that it happened sort of late in the game or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing, but that was essentially what he said. So knowing all of that has to make you feel a little bit uneasy about processes and credibility and instability, and those are the things that I wanted them to answer for, and the questions that I had for Nick Caserio when we talked to him on Monday. But that's my reaction, is that now they've gone through 2 coaching hires where they went with somebody that they either didn't believe in or shouldn't have believed in, and it just seems like a large waste of time. I know a lot is being made nationally about how the Texans have treated 2 black coaches in back-to-back years. And I think that that's something that they've earned based off of their own incompetence. Had they actually made sensible hires and then gone, like, had some conviction with it and actually gone with it, whether it been Lovie Smith in 2021 or keeping David Culley through 2022, had they done either one of those things, I don't think they would be having to answer for what looks like from the outside looking in. Like, if you're not as connected to it day to day, like I am, like you are, and like a lot of our listeners are, who are Texans fans and are clinging to and hanging to every headline and every fact about the Texans, and we have a much better grasp for the team and the coaching performances that we've seen over the last 2 years. Like, we understand that, but there's not really a good and significant reason for people beyond us to really be paying attention to this team. And so they just kind of fly in and they're looking from a bird's eye view and from afar, and they're saying, man, they hired and fired these 2 black coaches and didn't give either of them a chance. And it's like, no, it's not that they didn't give the black coaches a chance. It's that they didn't give no coach would have had a chance here. Like, even if this had been white coaches, it would have been a piss poor process. And you could have made the same argument about unfairness to not giving one guy more than 1 year to prove himself. Like, the fact that neither Lovie Smith or David Culley would get more than 1 year to prove himself, to me, is something that wouldn't that's something that should bother you for any coach, no matter what color they are, but more so than anything should reflect poorly on the process and the belief that the team had and the people that they hired.
What took place has already taken place. Now we're looking at Nick Caserio going into year 3, third head coaching hire. What were some of your takeaways from the Nick Caserio press conference that was completely different from what we basically got used to?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that is the takeaway, was just how different the tone was, how much more, I don't know if deferential is the word, but it almost took like a somber tone. And you could tell that Nick Caserio had a long last couple of days. I don't know if I'd ever seen him or heard him quite look or sound like that. And what I mean by that is, he's a guy that I think for a lot of people might even border on arrogance. And, and I don't know if I necessarily, like, maybe I do agree with that, but I don't necessarily have a problem with it. But what did stand out is that none of that really seemed to be the case on Monday when he stood in front of us. And I know a thing that a lot of us took away from, a lot of us who were there, noticed that he mentioned on several occasions, at least 5, I think we counted at the radio station, where, he talked about his job being in jeopardy, or suggested that, next wrong thing, or if they don't get this thing right, he's on borrowed time. I think the exact quote that he had at some point later on in the press conference was that the clock is ticking, which is obvious. I mean, the clock is ticking on every last one of us, but it's certainly ticking on him in terms of how long can you lean on. And I thought about this too, Cody. How long can Nick Caserio lean on the built-in excuses that we all acknowledge were real and fair to afford him, but for how long is he going to be able to rely on that as the excuse and the reason for why this team has not really made any progress? The reason why you have not seen this team really take any steps toward being in the next step, in the next direction. So in the next phase of the rebuild, like they are still, it feels like, until they start making these picks, which is why it is an exciting offseason, until they start making these picks and until they start spending this money, until they hire a coach, like right now in this moment, it still feels very much like it did when Nick Caserio got hired in 2021. So, and ahead of the 2021 season, and here we are going to be into the third season of this. So that stands out to me. Another thing, or I would just say about the whole tone of it and what my read of it was, what he was kind of trying to say when he's talking about his own job security or lack thereof if things don't work out or don't turn out to work out any better than they have so far. The thing that stood out to me, or my takeaway of it, is that the next coach, whoever they hire as the head coach, and I know we've seen who all the candidates are. The most recent big name out there was Sean Payton, or easily the biggest name and the most coveted candidate, probably the top candidate, I would say, of all of the coaching candidates that are going to be out this cycle. But the takeaway for me is that whoever they hire as coach is going to outlast or outsurvive Nick Caserio if and when this thing goes south. Now, it's entirely possible that they hire the coach, they turn things around, everything looks good, everybody's happy, everybody's successful, and we don't revisit this conversation. We're not talking about anybody getting fired because everybody's doing their job well. Like that's entirely in play. But if not, the next time what hits the fan, things go south, and it's time to fire somebody because they're that bad that somebody's got to go. The way I took it is that it's not going to be the coach next time. The coach is going to survive the next power struggle or the next, a sense of calamity. It's going to be Nick Caserio who's going to be out on his tail and is going to be have to be the one to answer for it. That was what I read from the tone. Now, is that reality? Is that actually what they're going to do? Trying to predict what the Texans are going to do is almost insane. So I mean, I know we do it and that's part of our job, but that's not what I'm doing here. I'm not saying that that's actually what's going to happen because I don't know. I still don't know exactly how and to what measures folks are held accountable around there because I feel like there's some inconsistency and just a lack of clarity on that. But based off of the tone and based off of the words that we heard in that press conference, it seems like the next time somebody's got to go, it's going to be the general manager, Nick Caserio.
If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you got to try a Built Bar. Well, we just got through the holidays, and I know my goal is eating a little healthier, a lot of healthier this year, actually. And if you're like me and sometimes you want to eat healthy but you don't want to compromise in taste, then, man, you got to try something different. You got to try these Built Bar. Try Built Healthy. Actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious you won't think that it's good for you. You may think they're lying to you, but we're not. Here on the Locked On Texans podcast, I'm not going to lie to you. These are perfect for your New Year resolutions. And the best part about it is you can go over, check them out, get some at the Sam's Club, or you can get some at Walmart as well. Right now, you don't need to wait around for a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering Built Bars at Built.com. Now you can get them again at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. Super easy. Just go in, cop them, grab, go to the car. Before you get home, have a little snack in the car. Why don't you? So make sure you check us out. Check out Built Bar, again, at Built.com or at your local Sam's or Walmart.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this latest installment of Locked On Texans. And Brandon, I can't let you go without talking about the last game of the season that might have been probably the second most frustrating to watch other than the week 1 contest against the same team. And the Texans, for some reason, I'm not going to say some reason because I am happy for the players. And B. Scott, you've been in the locker room like me. You get to know these players, and regardless of what media people think, regardless of what fans think, these guys do not go out there on the field to lose a game. Everyone understand that. The field, the court, the diamond, whatever the case might be, players and coaches are not down with tanking. But my biggest issue with this 32-31 victory against the Colts on Sunday was the fact that everything that we wanted to see out of the coaching staff, out of the players, out of Davis Mills, to be more specific, we saw it in the final game of the season. Brandon, what are your takeaways from this game?
Cody, you remember when Jonathan Grenard got that pick six in the game? Took that, picked off the Sam Ellinger pass.
By the way, another guy we all had high hopes for at the start of the season.
All right, exactly. So, which is what I'm getting at, what I'm getting to. I thought to myself, how did I know that Jonathan Grenard's been back for the last couple of weeks, for the last few weeks or so. So I know this wasn't like his first game back playing in the last game of the season. But still, as you mentioned, we had high hopes for Jonathan Grenard, and I still think he's a hell of a player. And when healthy, can be, a really good contributor on, he was the guy that I was most excited about at that draft class when they drafted him. I remember, that Ross Blacklock was the pick. They didn't have a first, so he was the pick of the year and the one that everybody focused on because he was that pick was part of the DeAndre Hopkins trade. And then Ross himself obviously is a local kid, so there was a lot of reasons to kind of fixate on him as a pick. But I remember saying, "Hey man, Jonathan Grenard, dude led the SEC in sacks and tackles for loss. I'm interested to see what that looks like." So I've always been more excited about Jonathan Grenard out of all the guys in that draft class. And love how he deals with us and deals with the public. I think he does a good job of being held accountable or being accountable and holding the team accountable. And then also just keeping it real. Like when I talk about accountability, just being one of the more honest quotes that we get. And so I say all of that to say that I like Jonathan Grenard a lot. But man, when he picked that thing off and took it back, I thought, man, he picked a fine time of all times. Now he want to be healthy. He picked a fine time to be healthy and like opportunistic and everything, being in the right place at the right time and making a pretty good hand-eye coordination kind of move there. We forget how special athletes these guys are. Like, oh, like that looks easy. Nah, man, that's not actually as easy of a play to make, even though it seemed like Sam threw it right to him. He's a defensive lineman. He's not expecting to get a catchable ball in that moment, and he catches it and runs it back. It's a hell of a play. You love to see it. If it ain't that week, if the number one pick ain't on the line, if you ain't done all of this doggone losing throughout the year that's put you in a position to upgrade your roster and get a player that can change the direction of your franchise. And so that was one of my things, was like watching Jonathan Grenard take back the pick six thinking, oh, now you want to be healthy. Now you healthy, huh? And I said this, I wish I could, let me see if I can remember the players' names because they were nondescript players. But for all of the hand wringing, Cody, about how hard the Texans tried, and like you said, they're not going to try to tank. Not only do they not want to, but there's an integrity issue with that. They can't be out there throwing the game. Like all hell would break loose. We would raise all kind of hell. It would be like, I'm pretty sure Congress would probably get involved. Like that would be a major story if they obviously and clearly tried to lose the game themselves as players. The way to actually do it is from an administrative standpoint for Nick Caserio to step up and say, Brandon Cooks is not playing. Jeff Driscoll will get this. We're making another QB change, and Jeff Driscoll will get the start. And the only way Davis Mills plays is if Jeff Driscoll literally cannot. Like if something happens to him, God forbid, right? So like we're gonna do that. We're gonna feed Rex Burkhead. We're gonna, do all of the things that don't make sense. A lot of the things in which they did during the season.
Exactly.
And that's how we're going to lose the game. We're not going to actually ask the players to go out there and tank. We're just going to put the worst players out there and let the chips fall where they may. But I mentioned this too, like for all the hand wringing about how hard they tried, how hard Lovie Smith coached, going for two at the end to ensure the win. Okay. For all of that, it came down to two players for me, man. It came down to two players that played for the Colts. And I said that Texans fans should hate these two guys for eternity. Sports hate, let's be reasonable. Let's not be ridiculous. But Texans fans should sports hate these two Colts players until eternity, certainly until the number 2 pick or whatever ends up happening with the draft actually works out. But for now, they should hate these 2 players. And the Bears fans should elevate them into the Bears Ring of Honor or pay them. I know you can't pay a bonus to a player on another team, but they need to figure that out, because Cameron McGrone, the linebacker playing special teams on that kick return, after somehow the Texans only for like the second or third time all year, maybe the second time all year, conducted a touchdown drive to open the game. You know, we don't see opening touchdown drives as Texans observers. It's not a thing that happens, but they did it in this game. So coming off of that drive, they get the return, and Cameron McGrone, a guy who I cannot pretend to know a lot about, linebacker and special teamer for the Colts, forces a fumble on his own man.
Yep.
On his own teammate, leading to a short field for the Texans and subsequently a field goal, allowing the Texans to get off to a 10-0 start. They got a 10-0 jump on this game. And that was the point where I started to really get worried, like, oh, not only could they win this game, it looks like they might, because the Colts, I know they were down 20-3 against the Texans and came back and tied it, but yeah, how do you feel good about the Colts gave up the biggest lead of the year and in NFL history this year, okay, against the Vikings? I mean, that's what they're made of. So you feel like you get up 10-0 on a team like that, you're probably gonna win. So that was when I first started feeling bad. Cameron McGrone. And then Cody, that's the beginning of the game. Fast forward to the end of the game. Ronald Thomas II, I think it was his name, the safety, who mistimes the jump on the lollipop pass, Hail Mary throw from Davis Mills to Jordan Akins that just falls in his hands, but only falls in his hands because it went through the hands of Ronald Thomas, who I would guess, I mean, I don't know when the kids started playing football, but I would guess that's going to be one of the easier interception opportunities that he'll ever get in his entire life. Certainly in the NFL. One of his easiest interception opportunities of his life. Okay. Mistimes this jump. Ball goes right through his hands into the hands of Jordan Akins for the touchdown that sets up the two-point conversion, that sets up the win and negates the Texans for a good part of the season here at the end, having the number 1 overall pick, seemingly locked up until they didn't. So those are the 2 players that I think about and the 2 plays that I reflect on in this game. I mean, like some positives, right? Or, hey, you had a couple of rookies that play well. Tegan Quatoriano had a couple of really good catches. Kenyon Green, I thought, played his best game. Nick Caserio said that on Sports Radio 610 on Wednesday when he talked to Payne and Pendergast in the morning. And it was something that I noticed when I watched the game. And I reluctantly rewatched this game on Monday because I watched it originally in a social setting at a bar, and I was drinking and I was having a good time. So I wanted to watch it with a little bit more of a critical eye, kind of sit down and watch it. And I did on Monday. And that was one of my takeaways was, oh, look at Kenyon Green out there holding his own. So like you had some positives that I'll take away and that I'll remember from the game. But like the main story of them losing the number 1 overall pick, to me, had a lot to do with Cameron McGrone forcing a fumble on his own teammate. And this Thomas character not being able to catch the easiest interception possibly of his career. It astounds me that could happen.
So what about your evaluation of Davis Mills? Because, you know, I was a believer at one time in Davis Mills, and I also said this on the recap show on Monday that we did right before we got the news about Lovie Smith, was the fact that I was also frustrated in him to a certain extent because everything that I wanted to see out of Davis Mills, I saw on Sunday. You know, I saw Davis Mills go out there and be aggressive, go out there, help this team move the chains. Not only that, I always wanted to see how Davis Mills will bounce back from mistakes. And he threw not 1, but 2 interceptions. And here you are, you put together arguably, if not one of your best and most impressive drive of your career at the end of the game that actually led to the Texans winning this game. So even then I was frustrated. So what are your evaluations about Davis Mills? By the way, he did say when we talked to him on Monday that he hoped that he did enough to save his job for another season.
Come on, man. So this was, to me, this was a very much a quintessential Davis Mills type of game. I mean, this is who Davis Mills is. Like, so I was thinking about this too before we started recording about Davis Mills specifically. Like, he does this thing where you want to come away from the game saying, man, Davis Mills had a really good game. That was a really good game. And then you go back and look at the game and you're like, yeah, he had some really good moments. And overall, maybe he did have a good game. But he also had some moments in there where you understand why he's Davis Mills, why he's not really going to be the guy that they invest in for their long-term future. I mean, here we are talking about how well he played, and he did, but he still had a couple interceptions, or at the very least, the pick six.
That was, and one of them was really bad, by the way. I can't remember which one it was, but it was basically like he just threw it right to the defender. I was like, come on, bro.
And he does that though. Like those things do happen, and so and the reason why I say it's a quintessential Davis Mills game is because you get both drastic, different variances of what Davis Mills is, like the really good game manager, but also can make a couple of plays. And to be fair to him, Cody, I've thought that Davis Mills has played better over the last, let's call them
4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, at least
he came back from his benching.
Yeah, at least going back to, what have you been seeing him do out there diving with the ball, like trying to, ball security issues, but it's because he's trying to make plays, diving towards either the pylon or towards the, the fumble that led to the Rex Burkhead.
Touchdown into the sea.
Yeah, I mean, he's been doing that, and even on that drive, he almost threw a pick on the play right before that. Should have been an interception thrown. So, like, we've seen this mixed bag from Davis Mills, and I thought honestly that was the more, if anything, that was the thing that I feel like I could rely on most and was most consistent with what I'd seen in the prior weeks. I was like, okay, well, Davis Mills, we know for sure is playing for his job. We know Davis Mills ain't out there tanking, but I mean, overall, man, it just confirmed to me what I already know. Davis Mills is a backup. Fine to have him back on he'll be back. He will be back. But he's got to accept the reality of, even at the end of the season, they were still bringing in the other quarterback, the practice squad quarterback, to add another element to the offense that they feel like you couldn't bring. And not only that you couldn't bring, but that the offense itself under you was not good enough without it. The whole Jeff Driscoll thing. So you don't go from, hey, we're platooning quarterbacks, we're running a 2-quarterback system after we've benched the guy, to now the next year he's going to be the guy that we're going to run with. Like, that's just not going to happen. Whether they draft somebody or whether they bring in a veteran and either give him like legitimate competition, or it really be just sort of understood that whatever veteran they bring is going to be the starter. So, like, I don't think he's long for this starting job. And when I say long for it, I say he's done starting until whoever the next starter is gets hurt or is unavailable to play for a game. That'll be the next time we see Davis Mills out there, other than a preseason game. But yeah, man, I didn't think that, let's just suffice it to say this, Cody. I didn't think that, as much as I liked what I saw from Davis Mills, and I did like a lot of it, okay? As much as I liked what I saw from Davis Mills post-benching, I didn't think it was nearly enough or anywhere close to having you consider doing anything other than, in this offseason, anything other than drafting a quarterback at number 2 overall, which is where I think this team should be right now. So kudos to Davis Mills for doing his thing. I'm pretty sure it made him feel good because, haven't won a lot of games since he's been around and whenever he quarterbacks. But yeah, no, it's not going to do. He needs more people.
Brandon K. Scott from Sports Radio 610. Brandon, really quick, where can our listeners follow you at on all your social media platforms? And be sure to tell them about the B Block podcast and your other podcast, by the way, that you host with Adam Spillane.
Yeah, man, I'm a podcasting fool these days, man. I come on and I podcast with you every week, at least as as much as I can with you and John Hickman. So I'm glad to always be able to do that. I appreciate y'all's hospitality for letting me in
Yes,
y'all's
sir.
space and letting me be a part of the show. I
Yes,
genuinely
sir.
feel like I'm a part of.
You should.
I do enough shows with y'all that I feel like the Locked On Texans podcast is a part of my portfolio as well. And that's thanks to y'all's hospitality, and I appreciate that. So I would say that and say thank you. But also, of course, I do the B Block podcast at least once a week, sometimes a couple of times if it's really busy. So make sure y'all are subscribing to that, the B Block podcast, wherever you get your podcast. And then Adam Spillane and I, who you mentioned, Adam Spillane from sportsradio610.com, covers the Rockets, the Astros, the Texans, everything for us at sportsradio610.com. We just started up the H-Town Hoops podcast where we're covering the Rockets, and they're having a similar sort of process of not being very good and honestly not seeming to make the kind of progress that you would like to see a rebuild make, as much as you might like the players that they have and the pieces that they put together. You might feel good about that, but you can't feel good about what you're seeing on the court. And so Adam Spillane and I are deep diving into that a couple of times a week. We actually just dropped an episode on Wednesday and another one's coming Thursday. And so we do that a couple of times a week. It's really fun. You can get that where that's an Odyssey production, by the way, with Sports Radio 610. And you can get that wherever you get your podcast. So yeah, man, a lot going on, a lot to do. And of course, you can find me at sportsradio610.com, at Sports Radio 610 on social media. That's normally me. And listen to the shows, man. You never know when I might pop up on the air.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. And be sure to check out my co-host, John Some Sports Guy Hickman, as well. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.